Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production. Today, bass drum muffling. How much is too much? Is that even a thing? We're gonna find out. Like many of our videos, up front, none of these are wrong. Make sure that we say there's no wrong here, these are just different. But we were thinking about what it means when people talk about muffling the bass drum and sometimes putting a lot of stuff in there, a little stuff, maybe none at all. And what's the threshold where we start to have diminishing returns in what is called a bass drum? You know, we want some bass in there. Not a whole lot to say about this up front. We're going to go through some iterations here, and along with some playing examples that I feel kind of go with the sounds that we're using. Just going to move through a few of these, talk about them a little bit, and think about the idea of how much is the right amount for the sound you actually want versus how much you may think is going to get you where you need to go. Two things to say before we start. Number one, do listen to this on headphones or on a system that's going to generate enough bass frequencies. Phone speakers, laptop speakers, small speakers. You're not going to get the full experience of this because we're dealing with very low frequencies here. This is a 22-inch bass drum. It's in the sub range at some points. So if you want to have the full experience, make sure you're listening to it on something like that. Second thing is, again, no compression, no EQ, no shenanigans of any kind here. This is the naked sound. We're not sweetening anything or adjusting anything at all. This is the pure deal right here. Up front, wide open, no sandbags in there. No nothing. As usual, we have our ported EQ3 on the front, and we have a UV EMAD on this side with the skinny ring in there for just a tiny amount of control to help really deliver what we're trying to do here. Well, what we hear is some resonance, totally usable, a little bit of pinginess in there because there is nothing in there at all, kind of par for the course. So the first thing we want to do is address maybe aspects of the sound that we don't want, such as the basketball-y overtone, without losing the warmth, the sustain, the fatness all around. My prescription for that is an EQ pad. Evans works great. Velcro holds it still. Let's hear that. Now right away where I'm sitting, it doesn't feel that different. It still feels big, it still feels boomy, there's dynamics to it. But in the mic, a little more clarity, still plenty of warmth, girth to the sound, a little bit of sustain. It's nice. It's only touching the batter head. There's nothing on the reso yet. Next step is we're going to add kind of a normal pillow that you'd find on your bed or that you might buy if you were just going for that kind of pillow. This one's going to touch both heads, but it's still only living kind of in the bottom, maybe 8 to 10 inches of each of the heads, so it's not completely stopping the resonance of the drum. And don't forget, as we often like to do, stick around to the end. There's going to be back-to-backs of all of these so that you can get into the subtleties of them without having to fast forward and rewind all the time. Now this to me gives more of like an expected, like there's muffling in this bass drum kind of sound. It's punchy. Again, there's still a lot of bass in this sound. Bass drum specific mics oftentimes are tailored a little bit in the EQ to help with this kind of thing. They scoop out some mids that maybe we don't want. They add some boost in the low end, a little bit of clarity in the top end. But it's important to note that this is functionally the naked sound of the drum, now just with a pillow inside. We haven't adjusted any tuning. We didn't even take the heads off. We're just putting these things through the port in the front to make sure that there's no variables to worry about beyond the muffling. Now, when we move to this much kind of coverage of surface area, particularly on the batter head, this is when we start to experience a feel change on the batter head that a lot of people, whether you're a beater barrier or not, like, and I like it too. And what it has to do with is a more kind of solid punch in the gut feeling when you hit that drum. Again, whether you're playing off of it or not, it still has dynamics. They're a little bit closer in terms of the quietest that you get and the loudest that you get out of it. But in terms of playing a lot of busy stuff, not having overtones or too much sustain flying around the rest of the kit, this really kind of isolates and compartmentalizes the kick sound. It'll also give you a little bit of less crosstalk between the rest of the drums when you hit the kick. And now for the full Monty. We're going to put 2 bedroom pillows in here, and these are going to basically cover the entirety of the batter head. This, for me, is getting into what I would consider to be too much muffling. And what I mean by that is we're starting to lose the bass in the bass drum. It's muffled, to be sure, but in terms of controllability and functionality, it's not better than the previous one where we only had one kind of bed pillow in there. We're starting to actually not have any kind of resonance or any kind of motion in the drum at all. If you put your hand on the shell, it's not really moving much at this point. It's not doing the job. And if you have a nice drum with nice shells and nice edges, this is where we're starting to defeat the purpose of all of that kind of engineering and technology that went in to make that drum sound rad. Now, as we said up front, none of these are wrong sounds, none of these are bad sounds, and there are times when this is actually super useful, particularly if there's a lot of low end in the mix, in the record you're making, or on stage, and you need your drum to not be competing with that. You can work on that with heads and tuning and things like that, but in a pinch, or if this happens to work and you're running with it, that's totally fine. It's just important to know that if you're playing your drum and you're muffling it this way and you're like, where is the low end? This is where it is. And so going back to nothing in there or stepwise removing things one at a time is going to be a way to kind of analyze just what you're doing there, just what it is doing to your sound, and make sure that you can retain the feel that you want, the sound you want, and also not lose anything that you do want in the process of muffling it. Now, if you'd like to hear more of all of these, jump over to the Patreon. There's a link below. Check it out. There's a lot more playing that goes on here every time we do these things, and that's where you'll find it. Now, something that I do want to talk about here that we didn't do today because I don't ever do it, and I want to explain why, is lining the inside of the bass drum all the way around with some kind of acoustic foam. This is something that I've seen a lot. I saw it the other day, like 2 weeks ago. Double bass kit, foam all the way around the edges, heavy metal situation. My problem with this, and again, if it works for you, I'm not begrudging anybody their choices, but the reason that I struggle with this is because you're taking all of the opportunity for reflection out of the inside of the drum. That hard surface in there is contributing projection and basically most of the high end of what's going to come out of a bass drum. I mean, maple is nice and hard. It's really reflective. If maybe you use mahogany or something softer, it's a warmer sound. But if you put foam all the way around the inside and then you want to project clarity, you're really shooting yourself in the foot if you do that. So if this is something that you've done for a long time and maybe you want to experiment with it a little bit, I recommend taking out half of it, if not all of it, and then slowly adding it back in just so you can see what it's actually doing to your whole sound. It seems like it's just touching the edges of the heads and muffling the edges of the heads, but it's actually changing the whole inside of the drum. If you've checked out our videos where we put, aluminum foil in there and things, that surface matters for the sound. So if this is something that you've been doing for a while and you want to kind of check it out and experiment a little bit, that's a great thing to take away and then start to add back in and really understand what you're doing there. Now again, just to reiterate, tuning's the same. I'm doing my best to play with the same amount of intensity and velocity in these things so that you can hear really what it's doing to the sound. It's important to note again that the feel is changing throughout all of them. The sound changes less between the first two. When we start to put a big pillow in there, the sound changes a lot. The biggest difference is between example 1, which is nothing, and example 3, which is single bedroom pillow. If you want to go further, you can put more in there. But hopefully this gives you a sense of where the threshold is, where you're starting to remove things that maybe you do want for the sake of your bass drum still being a bass drum. And that about does it. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you hear about all of our new videos. The Cymbal series is popping off over at the Patreon. Please follow the link below. Check it out if you haven't already. Contribute if you can. There's a lot of extra things from this video and all the rest of them over there. We are really, really grateful to all the patrons for keeping us going here. They are our primary source of income for the channel. We really appreciate it. Keep it going. We love you guys. And last thing, and yeah, can of worms time. Tell me your muffling stories. Tell me your not enough or your too muches. And also, if you do foam around the edge, I'm curious to hear about that too. Not just if you've done it for a long time, but also if you do it in certain situations, because I love situational choices like that. And if you have some, let us know.